Alok, I discovered something as in the course of my research, which is that when you were at IIT, you were really interested in ethical hacking,
Yes, I was.
and that got you banned from the computer center at IIT Kanpur.
For a few months, yes.
What exactly were you doing? And tell me about the computer lab, and tell me what the order or which professor called you up and told you that you're banned from the computer center.
So you're good with your research, Rohin. But I actually enjoyed discovering new technological powers, let's put it that way. And this was, I think, the year 1998 or 1999. The internet was very new. We were the first batch at IIT Kanpur to actually even get email addresses and access. Me and a couple of friends used to hang around in the computer center figuring out how Linux works and how you could actually go around the system and do things, although we never used it for doing anything nasty. But we once got caught, having root access to a machine.
I was about to say, were you trying to get root access? And then you said it.
Yes. And I think we were out of the computer center for a couple of months because of that. But I think we also built a very good bond with the sysadmin there because of this incident. Yeah.
It seems like such a quaint concept, right? The entire concept of computer labs. Because I remember it back from school and from colleges where labs were a thing. You take off your shoes, go inside.
Yeah.
There was dedicated time, and it was really valuable because it was almost like, wow, in this time, this machine is mine and I can do whatever I want to do with it.
Yeah, those were the days. We used to get time slots where we could print batch jobs.
Yes. Yes. I remember my earliest memories of computer labs in school were where you had these dot matrix printers, and you had these software that would allow you to print banners on long running which you could stick up in your room.
Yes.
Right, so that
ASCII
was
art and all
that's right, ASCII art and all that. Well, I mean, that's another era. Well, so that was that. You getting banned from the IIT Kanpur computer lab for a few months. Second, your company, it's Ixigo, but the actual name for the company is Le Travenues. Does Le Travenues come because you were in the French Riviera for the first 5 years of your career?
Partially, yes. So actually, the story goes as follows. Rajneesh and I, we quit our jobs and came back to India 2006, and we were registering the company. And it so happened that the ROC did not like that we were just calling it Travenues Technology Limited. They said this is a generic name, although I had my view on that because Travenues is also travel plus avenues. But they said, please add something in the beginning to make it more unique. And we were left with a choice of what do we add, right? And we just come from France and, everything had a le or a la in front of it. So we just went with le, and the ROC approved it. So that's the story.
And this is the thing. I sometimes wonder what are these rules that the ROC is applying, because similar things have come up with the Ken as well when we try to apply, or even the earlier company that like they will always reject it for the reasons that this is too common. Yeah. And then you're thinking, who else has this? Because I searched for it, I couldn't find anything.
Yeah.
And then you have to just add something to it, and then some random thing that you add in the spur of the moment ends up becoming a listed company 20 years later.
Absolutely. And a lot of debate happened just before the DRHP filing that should we change the name, right? Because people were like, okay, now you could probably call it Ixigo Limited. But, I think at that time we said this name has carried us well so far. It's probably going to carry us well from here as well. So we decided to just continue living with it. And, in a way, we are a house of brands, house of companies in some sense, because we acquired also other businesses and brands. So this becomes also the mothership in that sense.
All right. French Riviera, Le Travenues, Aloke Bajpai, welcome to First Principles. Thank you so much for being here in Bangalore this December morning. I appreciate it. We've been trying to get together for this for a while. I'm finally glad that it happened, and actually happened in a time where it looks like the Indian travel sector is sort of going through this incredible churn on account of the meltdown that Indigo had. But I must say this, that I mean, this is by virtue of my privilege and also because of the fact that I'm not in the travel space, that this way that you explained how plan A, plan B, plan C works is interesting, because for a lot of people, train is plan A,
Yeah.
and then sort of bus becomes plan B, or for some plane becomes plan B. I'm assuming the other combinations also. A lot of people look at, let's say, airlines depending on the fares, and if that doesn't work out, then train becomes plan B, etc. So these three sort of have this
Yeah.
kind of cascading, interconnected, if not this, if not that, which is
Yes.
actually a business
So there
opportunity
is,
as well.
I'd say there's a small subset of people on the flight side who will look at train only if the flight becomes too expensive and all of that. But the funnel from being a train bus user to becoming a flight user in the country, that's existed for decades, right? I mean, we all grew up on trains and buses, and then at one point we could afford to fly, right? Most of India still has not gone through that transition. So I think that will always be a natural funnel for growth, not just for companies like us, but also for the airlines themselves. So if an Indigo or an Air India are going to grow at a certain rate in the country, the net new additions are going to come from people who are traveling already but not taking a flight yet, right? They're sitting on a train or a bus already. At some point, they get a job that lets them afford flying, or an airport pops up in their city, which is something that has been happening now in the last decade, which says that, why do I need to take a train now? I can go to Ayodhya or a Gorakhpur or a Bareilly by flight. So I think that's the change that's going through India right now, and I think we are at a very, like, now, even though we are sitting 18, 19 years out in the business, it still looks like a very early time in the Indian travel tech journey, because a very small minority of people have actually come online and started doing things, right? We look at it through the lens where we are in the ecosystem and we believe that it's already a very large ecosystem. But if you look at the macro picture, penetration of even categories like buses or even hotels is very low in terms of online, right? Bus would be around 20%, hotels would be even below that. And therefore, a large number of people still are doing these things offline.
You mentioned hotels, which is actually your most recent foray or expansion in the travel space.
Right.
Now, up till now, I sort of get all your expansions, right? You started with flights, then you look down and say, hey, I mean, but flights is only so much. What about trains and then buses? All of that up till makes sense. Now, hotels is not a linear follow through from that, right?
Correct.
One could argue that, of course, anyone who travels needs to stay as well, but it doesn't scale. These are all modes of transport. The other is, in some senses, it's a mode of stay, etc.
Yeah.
So how does the person who's taking a train, for you especially as Ixigo, the person who's taking a train or the person who's taking a bus, tie in to the person who's booking a hotel? And how do you think about the hotel business as an OTA?
Yeah.
What's your thesis there?
Yeah, I think, see, these modes of transport are just entry points into the ecosystem. The way I look at it is that when someone comes and, let's say, searches for train utility information in our app or buys a bus or train ticket through us, they have stepped into our ecosystem as a user, and the entry point may have been that. But what have I done? I've built a relationship with an end user for whom this might be the first online travel interaction in his life, right? If I'm able to solve their pain areas, deliver peace of mind for that customer, and for me, that customer is not just the top 4% who books air, but actually an average middle class traveler who could be coming from a tier 2 town, tier 3 town. And in fact, the way we look at it is that we have to be most relevant to people without any bias for what they were looking for. Because if we want to be seen as the most trusted travel platform in India, we have to remove all biases of saying, I'm building for only X percent, Y percent of the population, but say, can we be more democratic as a platform? And then you realize that train or bus is just that hook or entry point into building that relationship of trust with the customer. But once you've built the relationship of trust, uh, what we have seen is that they will look at all travel related needs through us, because they have seen how easy it is to not just book with us, but get customer service when it's needed, get their money back if there's a refund. They've seen how we've treated them during COVID or any other crisis. They've also seen that we care not just about selling tickets to them, but we genuinely spend a lot of time and energy in use cases that simplify just their life, right? In terms of like flights, if you look at, we are probably the only company that spends disproportionate time worrying about, hey, can you track whether your flight is going to leave on time or depart on time? Where is the baggage belt? What is the gate number? Which check-in desk do I go to? We built something called Flight Tracker Pro 3 years ago. And we built it not because there was any monetization or anything, but we felt that why do I need to download a separate paid app to do these things when, we as an OTA, we're meant to handle customers.
Where do you get the data for all
And
this?
we pay for like this multiple sources where we get this data from. We spend money getting this data for our customers, but we believe that it's important. We believe that it's an important part of the handholding and experience. In fact, we do not even expect any monetization from it. What we expect is it will improve your experience so much that you'll probably go and recommend the app to 10 other people, or you'll probably stick around to our app because it does that better than anyone else, right?
So in some senses, you're investing because you want to leave some kind of a surplus in the hands of the customer. So the customer feels that I'm getting more value out of this, and therefore I will transfer some of that surplus through word of mouth.
See, Ixigo's journey is proof that if you serve the customers selflessly, over time they will reward you disproportionately, right? It takes a while. I think it takes a lot more resilience, courage, and patience to play with this playbook. But this playbook is very defensible and fundamentally strong. Because
help me understand, how would you break down this playbook? If you have to explain.
So our playbook is very simple, that if I identify the pain areas for customers in any vertical that I enter, which others have failed to identify. In fact, many times we've seen people have taken those things for granted. And I'll give you 2 examples. When we became a flight OTA, hollering the OTA for refunds was a given. It would not come on its own, and it would take many days. They would always say 7 days, 5 days, etc. Today, our average refund time is 2.5 hours, right? Getting hold of somebody on a call on an OTA was next to impossible. And it was a norm ki 5-minute waiting time is okay on the line. We said we have to change this. 97% of our calls have less than 2 minutes waiting time as we speak, right? This is last quarter. We publish this data every quarter to hold ourselves accountable to it. Price change at last step is something which, again, there was a norm of a certain percentage in the industry. When we hired people, they said, oh, this is how it always works.
What does that mean? Like,
you see a price, you go to the last step, suddenly you need to pay 5,000 more, right?
Right.
Mostly it's a caching issue because people cache this for a certain time and then, you have to free up the cache, right? So it's a technical solve that can solve this with.
So just from a layperson's point of view, you're saying that the first time when you saw the flight fare, it was fetched and kept with you
for some amount of time,
and then it changed at the airline end.
It changed at the airline end. You moved forward. So when you were actually selling it, you got the fresh one because you don't want the lookbook ratios to be bad. Right. But that's a technicality that the consumer doesn't need to care about. The consumer cares about the fact that they feel cheated if they go to the last step and they see a price change. Right? We spent 2 years just bringing that metric down through more intelligent caching, where we were preemptively understanding that if this is the last seat in this fare bucket and there's a very high probability it's going to move to the next fare bucket, I would rather show the next fare bucket. So I think if your obsession for what is okay in any vertical in terms of customer experience, that threshold keeps moving and you want to make it better and better, there's no limit to how good you can become, right? But I think most companies live with a certain level of mediocrity on customer metrics, and they're okay with that, saying I'm okay with X percentage of calls being abandoned, I'm okay with a 5-minute wait. And end of the day, the only thing we did right and different was we said we will not live with that mediocrity, even if it takes disproportionate time and effort to become really good at those things, right? We would not give up till we actually got there. And sometimes it took us years to get there. Trains, the same thing, right? Train utility features, we spent 5 years without any monetization, just building those, with not even thinking about when will we monetize, how will we do it. But one fine day when we reached a point where we were doing more downloads than any other OTA in India, and we were not selling anything to them, the insight dawned on us, hey, maybe we should be selling tickets. And we started selling train tickets, and it just took off because the trust was already there. So we established trust not by building a relationship through a transaction, but transaction is the way we monetize a relationship that was already built with that trust, right? And that playbook was converse of what the existing playbooks in our space were. And I think we've done that time and again. And now even on hotels, our strategy is to do just that, because there's so much in the hotel space that people have taken for granted, right? There's a reason why even today in India, for an average budget hotel, the dominant booking channel is a walk-in, right? More than 50% of budget hotel bookings in the country are still walk-ins. OTAs do not contribute more than 10 to 15% of bookings for these budget to mid-market hotels. And not that OTAs haven't been around, they've been around for 20 years, right? But they haven't solved the problem of trust. They haven't solved the problem of what you see is what you get. They haven't solved the problem of price parity not being broken through a walk-in discussion. They've not solved the problem of, what if I don't like the room and it wasn't the photo that you showed me? They've not solved a bunch of problems. I mean, and the deeper we're going into this, we are saying, hey, everything is still broken. It's almost like it's 1990s for the internet, right? There's nothing that has really happened in the hotel space on the budget side in the last 15 years. And I know it's a strong statement to make, but the fact is, it's hard to solve these things. It's not impossible. It's hard to solve these things. It needs a very deep supply side involvement to solve it. But it's not impossible, right? It's just that I think people have not made it the only obsession that they have in life to solve this, because that's what you need to do eventually in every vertical. That's how you end up solving it. It'll take years, but we know we'll do it.
Alok, I can't but help observe the fact that this clarity and conviction that you have on this is our defensive moat. This is how we will go deeper and deeper into. We'll pick a particular consumer segment. We'll look at their problems. We'll keep going deeper and deeper, getting better. That will become our moat. This wouldn't have been there when you just started in 2006 or 7, right? Because at that point, I'm assuming this is the market we want to be in. This is what we know. Can we make a business around it? And then it sort of started evolving. And at some point, you begin to realize that, hey, the way we operate, what we are good at is we are able to spot consumer problems, and we are obsessive and we don't give up. And if we stick with it over time, inevitably, we figure out how to monetize it and grow as well.
Actually, even when we started, I don't think we were very obsessed about monetization or is there a business model around this or not. Even on Meta.
What were you obsessed about?
We were obsessed about solving customer problems, pain areas. And we are product guys, right? So we wanted to build products that solve for those pain areas.
I want to connect
what we are good at, like you said, is identifying those pain areas and building deep enough empathy for the problem itself. I think that's something.
You said that earlier. You've used the word empathy, if I'm not mistaken, for employees that you hire. It's one of the strong skills that you look for.
It's one of our core cultural values. And it's been shaped by our experiences as well, because not just for the product, but also how we dealt with crisis. We have a more empathetic template for that, which was built through our own experiences. And but empathy is our core cultural value, and we never actually had cultural posters on the wall saying these are our cultural values. But over time, when we started asking Ixigems, okay, what do you think we stand for? Like if you had to write down 3 or 4 adjectives, to describe us. And and some words would start coming up from almost everyone, empathy, resilience, ownership, um, and also ingenuity, right? Like we've always been a little ingenuous in how we've done things. So some of these buzzwords that started appearing became our culture slide over the years, but we never had one in the early days. And what we used to tell ourselves as founders was culture should be what you do, right? What you do is who you are, as you know. But it's not about what you say you want to do or what you say your company is doing, because actions are going to speak louder than those words. And every hire you make, everyone you decide to let go, everyone you decide to promote, every product you decide to build, every feature you decide to shoot down and not do, things you say no to, this is all culture, right? All of this is culture. And so you have to be very thoughtful about these actions. Empathy, I think, is a core human value. It's not even a company cultural value. It's a core human value which builds trust, and which also allows us to look at things from the other's perspectives. I think if I go down a very philosophical and religious sort of path around this, you will also see that for most of the dharmic religions, it gets built through a journey of self-discovery, and you end up being more empathetic if you actually go down the path of saying, okay, me and the person sitting across the table are not very different. We are the same being inside, right? So for us, in some sense, it should come naturally. And I think what I've heard is from people in the valley that Indian managers actually are a little more empathetic, because somewhere I think in our culture and traditions we've had that sense of saying, okay, me and the other person are actually the same, right? I mean, deep inside. So I think it just stems from there, but it has been reinforced by the experiences that our company has gone through. So when you have nothing when we started, we had nothing. And then over time, there were many places in the journey, at least 4 or 5, where we ran out of money. What we still did not let go was this sense of empathy, saying, okay, I can empathize with what my team is going to go through. And they are empathizing with what we are going through. And, can we find a solution to this problem, right? And you will see that during COVID, during GFC, we never let people go. We never had a sort of
Sorry,
a
what's GFC?
global financial crisis.
Oh,
So 2008-9,
right.
where many companies actually ended up doing mass layoffs, right? We just took a contrarian view and said, perhaps there is another template. Perhaps there is a more empathetic way of doing these things, where the solution you're trying to find to the problem of viability of the business can be found in a more collective manner, which is good for everyone, right? And so when the global financial crisis happened and we were in the midst of a fundraise, which was supposed to close that particular week when Lehman collapsed.
You had a term sheet, if I'm not mistaken,
We had a $7 million term sheet that never came through. And the last minute, we had done docs and everything, right? So that day, and we were about 24, 25 people. So we did a quick all hands and told people what we were going through. And one of the options was to lay off people, and the other option was we find a solution in that room. And one junior engineer stands up and says, why can't we all work without salary? And and for a second, there was a silence in the room saying, is that even a viable solution? Or, the people may have been thinking, oh, why didn't we think of this? But when we actually started having that discussion from that lens of saying, hey, is there a solution? We found that, at a certain salary cut for everyone, the company would survive. And then we would compensate it with ESOPs or some other means, or when we were back, we could pay that. Things were agreed quickly. There was a whiteboard discussion. A financial statement was drawn on the whiteboard transparently for all employees, saying this is how much revenue we make, this is our salary cost, this is our server cost, and can we make it for 12 to 18 months? And then we found that if the founding team went down to zero, leadership team went to like steep cuts, and the rest were like 40-50% cut, we could survive, right? And we could make it to the other side. And we did, right? And most of those people stuck around for the next 4-5 years, right? Not just 1 or 2 years. And I think that crucible moment sort of shapes culture. And it just reinforce that empathy playbook that we were just talking about, right? And it just comes naturally in those moments, because that's when you live the values. That's when, values are tested in tough times, and it's easy to forget about them in those times and just say, okay, sorry, these are exceptional times, so we can't do this. But if you actually live up to them, we've seen that they pay back, right? COVID times, same thing happened. We all took a collective decision not to let anybody go. We also took a collective decision that we will not hold back refunds, because there were OTAs doing that deliberately to ensure their own survival. And we said, look, what is the worst case? Worst case, all travel companies die. We're going to die anyway. It's okay, right? Because we'll die a valiant death if we actually do it after refunding all the money to our customers. At least nobody will come and point a finger at us, right? And we did not also want a situation where people were struggling for their health, for their parents or their family members who were suffering from COVID at that time. And then you add a new struggle in their head कि मेरा 11,000 रुपए का refund आएगा कि नहीं. Like, that's the last thing people want to worry about in those difficult times, right? We were all going through a very difficult time then. So we took this decision right at the beginning of the lockdown. We'll refund, for all the major airlines and for IRCTs, whatever outstanding refund was there, we will not wait for it to come back. We will go ahead and refund all our customers that ask for or are eligible for those refunds where the flights are cancelled. And we did it proactively to the extent where we were again on the verge of, like not having enough money. And honestly, if COVID had lasted 2-3 months longer, we did not have the money to make it on the other side. So we kind of got lucky that the market opened up.
They say, right? Fortune favors the brave.
Well, yes, it does. But it's also like, I think sometimes you're just taking that bet blindly, right? Like you don't even know. And honestly, we had a discussion on the day the lockdown was announced, right? A night before that, because most of us could sense that it was coming. A night before that, we had this discussion, Rajneesh and I, where basically we said that, are we going to continue doing this if the lockdown comes and travel is gone? Or are we going to pivot the business? And we kept discussing, debating for an hour. We said, kal subah baat karte hain, right? Morning, I call up Rajneesh and we both said the same thing at the same time, ki nahi yaar, yahi karna hai, right? Like basically there's nothing else we can think about. And go back to the drawing board and say, okay, lockdown hai, there's no literally there was a graph which went down to near zero. No revenue, no visibility of when it opens up, and nothing to do at this point except be on the customer support and help people with refunds, which is what all of us did for almost 2-3 weeks. Then we said, which products make sense to build at this time? You'll not believe, during this time, the team huddles on a virtual call and they are saying, abhi kaun sa product banana hai, wo bataiye. And we said, okay, the big problem everybody's facing is refunds. Can we build a product where you never have to worry about getting a full refund from anyone? And we built Ixigo Assured during the lockdown. 15 days, the team turned around a new product where you press the cancel button and take your money, right? But you have to pay us a small fee for that. But nobody minds, because at the end of the day, it gives you immense predictability on, that
what
transaction.
What is Ixigo Assured?
Ixigo Assured is essentially...
it is one of your significant revenue drivers, if I'm not...
It's an important one. Yeah. I mean, basically, Ixigo Assured gives you full refund in case you decide to cancel for any reason up to a certain number of hours before your trip, right? Now, things can change, plans can change.
Insurance in some senses?
It's actually a fare type which is fully refundable, but whether or not the underlying is fully refundable, we will make sure that fare becomes fully refundable. So we are basically bearing some risk of whether the airline or the supplier gives us back full money or not. So if there is a deduction, we will bear the deduction.
So there is no insurer in the middle. It's
no
just
insurer
you
in the middle. It's us who are underwriting the fact that you will get a full refund. Ixigo Assured Flex also gives you a free modification. So you could either modify or cancel your ticket. And the modification you can do even for airport. Like you could buy a Bangalore, Delhi ticket and then change it to a Kolkata, Goa ticket if you wanted to. So it's almost like buying an option on a flight.
Interesting.
And And then on trains and buses as well, we launched this. On buses, in fact, we went one step further. We said we'll underwrite the experience. So if the bus does not turn up, if the bus turns up, let's say 5-6 hours late, or if the seat is broken, driver is driving wildly, whatever, we'll give you up to 150% the money back. Because on buses, the big trust element that was missing was, can I trust this operator? Because there are 20 operators on the route. I don't know which one to trust. So we said we will help you identify the best 2 or 3 operators based on operating experience and metrics. And there's a seal of guarantee called Abhi Assured. If you opt for an Abhi Assured bus, if anything goes wrong, we are there to back it with our money where our mouth is and give you back up to 150% for these particular cases. So in a sense, these are all what we call the peace of mind stack products, right? Where we are no more a company that sells travel. We're a company that sells peace of mind. That's what we keep telling ourselves.
So this Ixigo Assured is very interesting because I would assume the reason I ask is it insurance is because I'm very familiar with the pattern of you go to any OTA and you're trying to book a ticket. At the end of it, say, would you like to insure yourself against baggage loss, against flight delays? And most of the times that is merely a add-on which is actually fulfilled by a third-party insurer.
Absolutely. So we'd seen all these products. See, I'll tell you the problem.
No, sorry. I mean, the point I was completing is it looks like you didn't go down that path because you were faced with that crisis point during COVID and you all had your backs to the wall and you were trying to figure out what do we do. So you built the refunds product in a in that time, which effectively.
And I'll tell you why we did that. We did that again because of the passion for customer experience. When you buy a product which is, let's say, underwritten by any third party, etc., first of all, I advise you to read all the fine print, right? Which nobody does. Nobody does.
Because you're in the flow. It's just one check mark.
It's in font size 6.
Right.
You probably need reading glasses to do that, and nobody bothers to spend time reading 4 pages. Secondly, I advise you to look at the process for claiming back that money. Most of the time, they've made it so complex
that you'll give up.
Some of them will ask you for a scanned check copy. Even in 2020s, we thought that this would be done away with, but and then they sometimes find snarky reasons to deny it. The third thing, which is most important, is during the toughest of times, these products get switched off on these platforms, right? Because you're there for good times, these products will not be available. So there were 2 waves of, like, we launched this after the lockdown, and then there were 2 more waves of COVID post that, right? We kept selling this underwritten by, our basically pricing models that could say that we can tweak the pricing around, but let the product remain, right? So if you're in the second wave, which was the worst wave, people needed this. Because see, if I'm booking to a certain city, I don't know if there'll be a lockdown in that city or not. There's uncertainty. There's even more uncertainty. These products are even more necessary. But the fact was, most OTAs stopped selling these products during that time, right? And because we were
because most insurers stopped offering it.
They
to those
would have
OTAs.
probably, right?
Yeah.
And see, remember that if you're selling it as a fare type where the pricing is also done by you, because we can do this dynamically, right? Because we know the probability for every ticket sold, whether the person is likely to cancel, because it depends on the sector. If you're traveling with a family or on business, there's a different cancellation probability, time of the day, so there are multiple factors we look at to price these products, right? In order to not lose money on them, because it's very easy to lose money if you have a static model, right? I think the level of sophistication we've built this with, I don't think any third party can do that easily without the amount of data that you also need, right? Like on trains, you literally need to be able to know that the likelihood someone will cancel in a certain fare class on that train for that day, and whether it is around a festival season or not. There's a bunch of things that you have to look at. Almost 30 different parameters that we sort of optimize for. It's not easy to do these things. But we do them we actually do them because they are hard. Because the customer at times needs solutions that for the company is very hard to deliver. But if you can, it's an aha moment, right?
And often these become moats.
And these become moats. These become the reason for people people type Ixigo Assured on Google and come to us, because that itself has become a brand, that people started to look for. So I think that it's the amount of time we spent on it is disproportionate also, because we keep coming up with new products. We came up with something called alternate travel plan, which was formerly called travel guarantee on trains, where we said that if waitlist spillover is such a big problem, why not put our money where our mouth is? Because if I give you a 90% chance of confirmation and it still doesn't confirm, you're left high and dry. Maybe you had an exam or a marriage to attend or something, and now you're stuck there without a confirmed ticket, even though I told you there was a 90% chance. Instead of doing that, I said, you know what? I'm going to put my money where my mouth is and say, buy an alternate travel plan from me. I'll give you 3x the money back if it does not confirm, right? And you can use that 3x to buy a flight or a bus or an alternate Tatkal train instead. 1x comes back in your original source, 2x as Ixigo money, but you can use it within the next 7 days to actually buy an alternate, instead of waiting or being left high and dry where you have no mode of transport left, or it's not affordable, etc. Again, the NPS of these kind of products is very high, because when people actually are in that need, it's got sent for them.
That's a net promoter score.
Net promoter score, right? Because put yourself in the shoes of someone who had to be in another place, and last moment his ticket did not confirm. He can actually now travel on the best Volvo bus on that route, or a plane that person could not have otherwise afforded also, because we gave 3x the money, and does not miss that opportunity. They're going to remember that experience for a while and tell it to their friends. So most of these products have generated immense word of mouth.
This is that famous thing that Paul Graham used to say, right? Do things that don't scale.
That's right.
Right? Where you do hard things which others won't easily do, and they don't scale very well. But when they do, they effectively become moats.
Yeah, and sometimes they're the obvious things to do. They are staring in your face, but you don't do them either because somebody's Excel is showing you that it's going to blow a big hole in your pocket, or somebody's saying, no, the industry doesn't work like this. Right? This is what you hear many times, कि इस industry में तो ऐसे ही होता है. Right? And I think if you live with those established norms as a company, you're never going to have breakout growth. So you have to sometimes go and say, I will not live with how this industry has been operating forever. I will create some new, establish some new norms and create my own space, right? Because if you fight a battle on somebody else's playbook and norms, it's hard to win that battle, right? And which is what we did all along in our journey. We actually never followed anyone's playbook, which is why for the longest of time, we were written off by people. People said, we'll not get there. We're wasting our time on trains. We heard a lot of things from many people out there. But deep down, we knew we were doing the right thing for the customer, and there would be a time where we would leverage that to build something bigger. These playbooks only work long term. So in a 1-year time horizon, you're a failure. In a 10-year time horizon, suddenly you're an overnight success. Right? But during those 9 years, you don't care what the rest of the world is saying. That's the most important thing. Because if you did, you would actually use the noise instead of the signal, right? The signal is what your customers are telling you. The noise is what the rest of the world are telling you. Investors are telling you. It's all noise.
Got it. So now I'm essentially going back to that point in time in 2006, 2007, when you were having conversations with VCs and you were not getting funded. Yeah. And I'm thinking, what the VCs, if someone had spotted this in you back then, what they would have seen was, here are two folks. They are going to be supremely empathetic. So I know I can take it for granted that they'll consistently find pain points with customers and not give up. 2, they seem to be incredibly resilient. I know these guys won't give up, even if they have to mortgage their homes, go without salaries, etc. and stuff like that. They'll do it. They'll go through it, whatever it takes. And the third thing is, they always seem to have this sort of outsider mentality, saying that we won't take this for granted. These things are good to bet on. Let me bet on that. So do you try and spot this when you're occasionally writing your angel checks as well? What signs do you look for? What questions do you ask? Because this is not easy to spot for anyone.
I think there has to be some amount of craziness, as you call it, right? Which is, if it's very obvious why someone is doing something, well, everybody out there would find it obvious, and most likely those assets will also be overvalued because it's just an obvious. 99% of the people think that that guy will succeed, and everybody's piling on. I think some of the best ideas out there have not been discovered, and they're run by passionate founders who will not care what the world thinks about that. But as long as they have traction from customers, which is real, and they are so obsessed about it that they will not give up easily just because they had 1 year where they couldn't raise money, or if there was. And I think it's hard to spot, to be honest, in the early stage, because you can only tell this after a few years and when people have gone through tough times. So when these founders come to me, sometimes I tell them that I actually wish that you will go through some difficult times in the next 1 or 2 years, because that is very important for you to go through. And now as a parent, I also wish upon this for my children, right? For the kids, because I think without seeing difficult times, you don't get shaped in terms of actually living up to the values that you talk about, whether it's in a family or in a company. Difficult times are the true test of values. Difficult times are also the true test of character, right? Like, will this person behave differently just because something didn't work out? It starts with yourself. It's very hard on you, first of all, because going through a tough time can be very mentally taxing, mentally challenging for a founder.
How did you?
So you have to first learn to
manage to.
Well, it's never easy, right? Like, we could tell you that
you started the business in debt.
Yeah.
There have been periods where both of you went without salary for a significant point in time. If I'm not mistaken, at one of the points where Ixigo was almost out of money, you had to mortgage your house as well, etc. So, right now, the thing is, of course, you're telling me this as a founder right now, and the founder is expected to provide this support and reassurance that we will emerge out of this, etc. But what was the source of support for the both of you?
Right. No, I think our families were definitely strong pillars of support. Both of us had very supportive parents when we were starting. I don't think we were. Of course, my dad did ask me, "Are you sure about this?" etc. But beyond that, once he saw that I was, we had immense love and support from the family. My dad helped me pay off my B school loan, because I didn't for the first couple of years of Ixigo, we hardly took any salary, right? And then there were moments in the middle where that happened again. I think I got my first credit card in 2011 or 12, not before that, right? So
it's like 6 or 7 years after starting up.
Yeah, about 4 or 5 years,
yeah.
4 or 5 years after starting. So basically, it was tough, and for Rajneesh as well. His parents were very supportive, and then when we got married, our wives and then the kids have been sources of sort of mental stability in times of distress. Because even like, if you look at last crisis, big one was COVID, and when you see your company, which was doing well and had just turned profitable, we just turned profitable like a few months before the lockdown. It was a struggle to get to that point and then be enjoying that moment, and then suddenly COVID hits you, and you're like, we don't know if we'll make it on the other side, and it was very stressful. But we didn't let. First of all, you never let that stress show to your team, because you don't want them to be stressed out completely. So I think you have to, as a founder, keep that within yourself. And I think you have to be transparent about the fact that you're going through a crisis with your team. That's very important in those moments, because they will come and actually give you a lot of signs of support. So when we actually told our team what was happening, they sent us a lot of messages of love and support, saying, don't stress out, we'll make it happen. I still have a lot of those stored. I look at them at times, but they said, it doesn't matter, we'll make it on the other side. Even if we don't get paid, we are there for the company. And I think those things also, the employees have also been a very strong source of support during this crisis. But there are low moments in every founder's journey. There are low moments. You mentioned about this VC that actually told me back then that I couldn't even raise $100,000. When you're building something passionately and somebody says something like that to you, you actually do lose sleep over it. But every time that has happened, we've come back the next day and said, let's prove this person wrong. My inbox is full of VC rejection emails, which I've never published, but I have tons of them, I promise you. Because not just in the first 1 or 2 years, like if you look at our journey, it was very hard to raise money because the incumbent, which was listed, was losing money for almost 10 years. Uh, the space had already consumed a lot of capital but didn't have much to show for it, right? Because many other OTAs had raised a lot of money. And it was very hard to even tell people that, no, we are different and we're going to build this more efficiently and we're actually going to build something more viable. And it was only through our actions over a decade that we proved that out, and then we were able to sort of raise money and grow after that. So I think it was not an easy journey at any time. There were very low moments at times when you had no one, but in those moments, I had music or something else to put my mind into, because it can drive you mad, because it's a very lonely place at the top. You have literally nobody to go to. But we had also supportive investors. So both Elevation and Peak, during difficult moments, at least, at times, I would chat with Shailesh and get some emotional support from the perspective of saying, hey, don't worry, this will go, like, especially during COVID. I think the fact that you have people around you that are willing to support you even in the toughest of times gives you that mental balance. But it's tough. It's not something there's a playbook for.
There is this phrase that I think you've used multiple times as well, which is the cockroach startup, right?
Yeah.
Now, I completely get it. Like, cockroach startup, because, it's resilient and it survives. And I think survival, I mean, we've spoken about resilience, we've spoken about empathy, but I think there's one of the other things as well, right? Survival also, you speak a lot about that, right? Because I think people from the outside sometimes forget that survival can never be taken for granted, right? So it's like he who lives to fight another day, but for that you need to live, right? Now, like you said, these are really tough, and you're fortunate to have employees who kind of stuck along for the ride, including at times by taking deep pay cuts, etc. But on the balance, how do you convince employees to work for? I can understand founders saying, I want to build a frugal startup or a cockroach startup which will survive, which will sustain, which will stand the test of time.
Yeah.
I get that. I can understand from an investor's point of view saying, let's bet on these people, because we may not understand business models right now, but whatever things are 10 years from now, these folks will figure it out and they'll stay the course of time. But when you look at it from an employee's point of view, especially from in these times when it's sort of, and everyone is, oh, here's a shiny company with so much of funding and valuation, and here is this interesting space, and here is this, like, fancy AI based startup, right? Being part of a cockroach startup is a harder sell. So what's your advice to people, including founders especially, to find employees who are likely to be aligned to this culture of resilience, empathy, survival?
It's a great question, Rohin. And I think we have the good fortune now of seeing 20 years of Indian startup ecosystem history, where you have seen all kinds of playbooks play out, and you have extreme examples on all sides. I think one or two things, right, have not changed and will never change, which is, if you are building a company with a pure intent of serving customers and solving real problems, you will have stronger fundamentals as a business, right? Secondly, if you think about what people bet on, whether it's an employee, whether it's an investor, what are people betting on when they, because even joining a company is a decision. People sometimes leave large companies and join us. even they've left big four, big tech companies, etc., and joined us. But that's a very tough decision for someone to make. I think it all boils down to alignment with your vision and belief in the people who are running the show, right? So people remain very important. How the leadership team and how founders behave, which is a less discussed topic in the ecosystem, but it's very important because they become the internal role models and they end up defining the culture. So you have to be at times restrained, and you have to at times make sacrifices that set the culture, right? That define the culture, right? And after going public, I recollect that somebody in my leadership team came to me and said, does this mean that some of us will be entitled to business class travel in domestic? And I said, hey, dude, I'm traveling economy, right? So forget about it. And now we have even more people that we are accountable for. There is hundreds of thousands of retail shareholders. We have to be even more accountable now than we were earlier, right? I think it's decisions like these that define culture. And you're also making, who doesn't enjoy traveling on business class, etc., right? But if I'm doing it on a personal trip with my own money, it's different. But if I'm on a company trip, I will set the rules that I expect others to follow, right? And the rules have to be the same, because if I set different rules for myself, I'm already sending a signal that for certain people in this company, the rules are going to be different. Till date, I don't have a cabin in office. Till date, I don't believe in having special privileges just because I founded this company. I'm just another Ixigo, right? And I think it's some of those things that hopefully, set the right culture internally, but it requires some amount of sacrifice to do that, right? It requires some amount of restraint to do that. And I think focusing on the right things, again, if we say we are customer obsessed and customer first, if there are decisions we need to make where in the short term, they may even harm us financially, but in the long term, they reiterate our commitment to our values, we are not shy of taking those. And very recently, we had this Indigo crisis unfolding. We had to take a decision that during this time, are we going to refund the convenience fees, assured fees, not charge cancellation fees, etc. It was a very obvious decision, right? It was basically taken in 5 minutes in our discussion with the leadership team, where everybody said it's the right thing to do. We'll figure out, nobody bothered to even calculate how much money will this involve, because we were like, whatever it involves is the right thing to do. People are struggling right now at the airport with a crisis unfolding. Do we want them to take load on getting 500 rupees more back from us or not, and waste any minute of their time on it? No, right? And let's make a very clear statement of that. And we are probably the only OTA that made that kind of a public statement saying we are going to do that. But we did it because the right thing to do, right? There's nothing more to it. Those decisions in some companies become tougher because you apply other filters which are related to, is this going to impact us financially? Is this, the right thing for our shareholders? But remember, what's the right thing for your customer in the long term will be the right thing for your shareholders, right? Even if it involves a short-term hit. And in our story, time and again, we have taken these decisions where we say that if we put customers first, we have to put customers first. So it's customers, then employees, and then us, right? As founders, that's how we think about it. And that order should never change.
So in some senses, the decision was already made for you. The weight of all the decisions that you've made in the past when faced with these situations, do we take a hit or do customers take a hit? You'd made those decisions in the past. So this was just in some senses continuation of that same culture.
Exactly. So it was
in
a very
another
obvious
organization, it would be the reverse. Right? In another organization, if they had to view that, of course, it's the weight of earlier decisions where no, we don't do that, right?
Right.
I want to still close that question about employees.
Yeah.
Why should employees? What's your pitch to employees joining quote unquote a resilient cockroach startup? What is in it? What's the cost benefit analysis for an employee who joins a resilient cockroach? Let's say someone joined you 10 years
yeah.
ago, 15 years ago.
So I'll
what
tell
do
you-
they get at the end of it?
I mean, first of all, why we use the term cockroach in some of our discussions, and this even is before, I think probably 2013, 14 onwards, we've been sort of using this term. But the reason why I believe we need a different term for companies like ours is because there was this obsession about becoming a unicorn. And hopefully that obsession has tempered a little bit.
It has. I have not heard many
Right.
recent articles about number of unicorns in India crosses XYZ number.
And I think there was this mad obsession about saying, when are you becoming a unicorn? Are you a unicorn yet?
Sunicorn.
Sunicorn, etc., etc. And I think any obsession about chasing a certain valuation number, I believe, is fundamentally flawed, for the simple reason that valuation follows from building value, and you can't put the cart before the horse, right? And if that becomes your only goal in life, you will take shortcuts and you will make mistakes because you're suddenly chasing a number or a goal that doesn't mean anything, actually, if you ask me. So in some sense, I tell my team that we are lucky that we never became a unicorn because, even though we crossed 1 billion in the public life, but that doesn't count because you have to be a privately funded company to be 1 billion plus. But the fact is that the ecosystem needs to understand that you could even become a decacorn one day if you're doing the right things, right? I mean, forget unicorn. But the question is, do you actually make that something so important that you're going to cut a big cake in your office the day you cross a certain valuation? We've never done that. By the way, on most of our funding rounds, you would see we've never even disclosed or talked about what valuation we did it at, because we just felt it doesn't matter, right?
No, I get that, Alok. I'm going to take you back to the payoff for the employee. I didn't mean that from a monetary point of view as well.
I'm
right?
coming
This
into
is
that.
the-
So when I think from an employee perspective, right, it's important to, at the time of hiring, set the right expectations. One of the ways we do that from a cultural fitment perspective is that till date, either Rajneesh or me actually interviews at the final round every person, and we are now 550 plus, but we can still manage to take out that half an hour, an hour to actually meet that person and figure out if there would be a good cultural fit. The other thing we do is we do the cultural induction ourselves when people join. So every quarter we have one for new joinees, and where essentially we want to tell them these stories, reiterate these values, remind them what's important. And one of the things I tell them is that, remember, you're not working for your boss, you're not working for me, you're not working for whoever you report to. We are all working for the customer, right? And we need to keep reminding ourselves that all the time. And I think you need to keep reiterating that in every discussion with people, whatever your cultural values are. Like in the case of empathy, we give examples of where we showed empathy and how we show it, and what does it mean, and what are the ways in which you can build more empathy. And I think if you keep saying that and keep demonstrating that through your actions, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy afterwards, right? Like people will see that, and the next, in fact, people wait for a crisis. It's funny, but in our company, people get excited when there's a crisis, saying now is the time to shine, because we've always done that in the past, right? So we
It's
never
a very
waste.
famous saying, right? I think Ayrton Senna or someone said that the easiest time to overtake others is when it's raining or something like that, right? Because it gives you an opportunity. The crisis becomes sort of like the opportunity.
Yeah, in some senses, I think people make knee-jerk decisions during crisis, which optimize for the short term. But if you just keep doing the right things even during a crisis, and if you actually sometimes be a little opportunistic, because others go defensive usually in crisis situations, but if you're able to play offense at that time and say that, hey, I'm gonna do something which probably nobody's even thinking of doing right now, but it's the right thing to do. We've seen that playbook, people actually remember what you did for them. So one thing I've realized is customers will never forget what you did for them during a difficult time, ever, right? During good times, if you gave 100 rupees more, less discount, etc., they won't even remember that. But in the worst of times, in COVID times, if we actually treated people well, in the current crisis, if we are actually treating people better, they will go and tell their friends about it. Um, and for obvious reasons, right? And it's just the template that also guarantees that you're optimizing for the long term, you're not optimizing for the short term.
I'd like to wrap this up by talking about you outside of Ixigo and work. What's family like for you?
I have two kids.
How old are they?
They're two boys. They're 13 and 10 and a half. So there's a bunch of energy in the house as well. And of course, I have my dad, who's always been a pillar of strength for me. And
Who apparently used to take you for walks on the IIT Kanpur
yes,
campus before you got into
before
IIT.
even I got to, so more to
And
inspire me to get there. And obviously my wife has been a very strong pillar of strength as well. And like we've, we got married in 2009 when I was actually just coming out of the one crisis. So she's seen us, she's seen me go through this entire journey, right from being a company that was barely surviving to sort of what it is now. But the thing is, it's gotten more intense over time instead of freeing up my time, because post going public, I think one thing that has happened for sure is there's a lot more noise out there, I would say, right? Because the signal to noise ratio when you're building in private, and you're not seen as the you're not the talk of the town, or you're not seen as the hottest startup out there. It's actually a better place to be, because
you can
quietly keep doing the right thing. So I think there's been a little more noise and distraction, but we have tried to stay away from it. At least I've shielded the rest of the team. Me and my CFO are able to handle most of the outside world distraction that the public market causes. But what it has done for the team is instilled a deep sense of responsibility, because it has reinforced that people have given us their trust and love, because they think we are playing for the long term and doing the right things for the customer. And we have to therefore have additional responsibility to keep doing that, and not get swayed by short-term optics or trying to optimize, for a quarter, etc. Because many public companies fall into that trap. So what it means is that we need to just do what we were doing and keep doing even more of it, because we now have the capital and the backing of many shareholders out there, retail as well as institutional. We also have a very transparent and high degree of disclosures in the public market. So if you compare our disclosures versus most of our peers, we disclose a lot more, and we do it on purpose. So before we were going public, I met Sanjeev, I met Sanjeev Bikhchandani, TV Mohandas Pai, and bunch of other people who are experts in public markets. And some of their advice which resonated and which we followed is under promise and over deliver, and basically we need to continue publishing KPIs and metrics that people expect us to disclose as we do new things or as we enter into areas. So for our existing verticals, we already disclose a lot more than any other player. Even when we enter into new verticals, as and when we start disclosing them, we have to make sure that we set new norms on disclosure, which both Infosys and InfoEdge are examples of being at the top end on disclosures and building the right governance standards in the company. And I think that's something which we learned from them, and we've sort of tried to follow. the last thing I'll say is that not much has changed after going public. To be honest, at least it's actually one institutional investor told us that you were actually building like a public company all along without realizing
you just didn't
it.
realize it.
You just didn't realize it. And I think in many senses that is true, because if you're building it in a slightly more capital efficient and conservative manner, I would say, and also not for the hype, but actually for the long-term sustainability of the business, then that's what public market investors want, right? As well, it's very aligned with the longest term institutional shareholders that exist out there, whether it is mutual funds, whether it is your sovereign funds. They all like companies that are building for the long term, right? So I think it's not very different in that sense from how founders want to think about it. It's just that you have to live up to the narrative that you project, and you have to also be a little more conservative in what version of the future you are actually talking about there, because people hold you accountable for every word you say. Yeah,
that's true. What are your interests outside of work? What do weekends look like for you?
In summer I swim. I love reading, though I'm finding less and less time for that. But
fiction or non-fiction?
Both, actually. So I love, actually, history is a...
Do you have any recommendations from the last year or two? I've
been reading some of the William Dalrymple books.
Got it.
Very fascinating about the history of this part of the region, and the interplay with the colonial times. And so it's a very fascinating there's so many learnings that you have from history that you can still apply today. It's very fascinating that some things actually don't change over time. And the geopolitical situation that's going on, you can read many of the things from history there.
I also want to, since you mentioned colonialism and how things have changed, I want to connect that back to empathy, because one of the most recent trends that playing out right now in America is empathy is not a good thing. There's a lot of people, including Elon Musk, who say empathy is one of the worst features that's in Western civilization, right? I would argue it's not a feature of Western civilization, but it's again you connected earlier back in the conversation to dharmic religions, etc. How empathy is more of a part of life. Last question: on a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your life?
I would give it an 8. Yeah, I'm reasonably happy. I need to take out more time for the family and kids. That's the part I would rate myself low on. Reasonably happy with how I'm able to do at work, as well as in terms of following my passions. There's always scope to improve.
Aloke, Bajpai, thank you so much for this conversation.
All right, thank you, Rohin. It was a pleasure to be here.
If you've been a long-time listener to this podcast and are glad we're back, do tell the world by sharing this episode with everyone you think will find it valuable. Produced by Udantika Kashyap and mixed and mastered by the wonderful Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer. This is me, Rohin Dharmakumar, signing off. We'll be back soon with another episode.